This is a Little Dove production. Hi, this is Eva again, talking to you about art and pain. And tonight I'm going to delve into dissociative identity disorder. And I'm going to call it DID just because that's the acronym for it. And I'm going to compare it through Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, which is a Russian novel, probably his most famous one. And I always use Penguin translations in case anybody cares about that. I was going to use several other books, but I realized that there was so much in that particular novel that we could discuss. It was like, why even bring all the other stuff in? All right, so in a nutshell, the story of Crime and Punishment, I'm going to do that first, and then I'll go over DID and their symptoms. And there's different kinds of dissociative conditions. So there's the amnesia, depersonalization, derealization, and the one that people always see in movies and stuff like Sybil, like multiple personality disorder. That's not what it is, but it can become, like in super rare cases, a condition like that. And what they call the different personalities, they call them alters. So it'd be like, they don't call them personalities. So it'd be like, this alter was, like a Southern girl, or this alter was like, an angry man or something. And then you would have the different alters coming in based on what circumstance you were involved in. But again, what I want to say about that is so rare and really just overblown to a ridiculous point. This association is a main point of usually childhood trauma. It can also be adult trauma, but very common in childhood trauma. So dissociated states, that's really what I want to talk about, because that's really what happens most. The amnesia part, again, it's like really infrequent. So, like the amazing studies of these certain people where this has happened to, but it's not enough to really, hang a whole, this is all my personal opinion. To me, it's not enough to highlight, the whole disorder on, because it just doesn't happen that often. So, I mean, we're everyday people, right? We're just everyday people. So it's like being struck by lightning. Probably we would have more of a chance of having a disassociated state after a trauma than we would ever have of these, the things that are in movies like Split or Sybil. All right, so Crime and Punishment is basically about, I think he's a 23-year-old man, and he is a poor student. He's living in like really terrible conditions in like a tenant apartment. He's starving. I mean, not starving, that's dramatic. He is not getting enough to eat. He is a full-time student. His sister is living with his mother, and at the point of the novel, he's upset because his sister's about to be married off to this old rich man who is honestly has a kind of disgusting sexual history. So Rashana, okay, his name's Rashanikov, whatever. I'm going to call him Nikolai, because Nikolai is like a really common Russian name. So, Okay, so Nikolai is trying to, come up with ideas. Like, how can he get himself out of this crappy circumstances? How can he turn his life around? How can he have money? And since he's a student, he's reading all these famous philosophy and theories, right? So one of the things he gets really obsessed with, and he writes this he thinks is like an amazing essay, and it's on, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like The Great Man or something. But basically what it is the philosophy that if there was no moral code. Let's say there's no good, there's no evil, there's no God, there's no devil. We're just sort of abstract human beings. We're not associated with any moral code, okay? So when he started studying this philosophy, it was very much like, well, if you were a nihilist, you could just do whatever. Whatever seemed, I don't want to say like survival of the fittest, but it's much like that. It's like, well, if you had to do what you had to do just to improve your circumstances in your families, like, wouldn't that be objectively, intellectually the smart thing to do? And so he comes up with this theory based on his own like amazing paper that he is going to be that man. And what he's going to do is, there's a pawnbroker who everybody hates. Is an older lady, and she's really mean, and she rips people off all the time. And I think she's his landlord. And he's like, well, why should she live, right? Because she just brings misery to people. So he decides, if I killed her, because he knows where she keeps everything, her money drawer and everything, he's like, I think the great line is, well, to down one, I would save thousands. Because he has this idea, like, he's going to take the money, he's going to save his sister, then he's going to, finish his education, get more education, so he can become an amazing professor author, right? And then he decides he's going to then go around, in Russia and, like, make everybody's lives better by, like, improving them, because, he thinks he's intellectually gifted, and he's going to, make other people's lives, he'll give a life of service, basically. That's what he's saying. In order for me to, make myself feel better about committing this violent crime, I'm going to then do a bunch of good works, and then it'll all sort of even out, and in the mix, I'll also save my sister. Because it was really common back then for girls in the family to end up having to prostitute to feed their families, unfortunately, or be married off to, not the best people. So he comes up with this plan of how he's going to do it. He gets like a knife, and he's going to pounce on her and kill her quickly, take the money, and then he has this other idea, because he's such a good person, that he's going to save her sister, because apparently her sister is, I guess she has some mental difficulties, and she's not able to defend herself very well, and the pawn lady is always beating her and treating her like crap. So he's like, oh, and then I'm going to free her, because she won't be abused anymore. So what happens is what happens in most crime stories, is it doesn't go according to plan. Big surprise. So he goes, tries to kill her. She puts up a fight. The whole thing gets screwed up. And the sister comes in and doesn't really understand what's happening, but she's now a witness, right? So he somehow ends up killing both of them. And then he's so freaked out that he doesn't even steal the amount of currency he was planning on doing. So he gets more like some baubles, jewels, some money, but not enough for, basically he didn't follow his plan, because, life doesn't follow a plan, right? Like, things unexpectedly happen. And he literally came up with like zero plan B, no plan C. Like, he didn't come up with anything like, oh, well, if this goes wrong, or this happens, or somebody sees this, like, he did nothing, he just did it like plan A, and I'm so smart, it's gonna work. So he ends up, I always remembered him like digging a hole and putting the money and jewels in there, but apparently when I reread it, he just sticks them under some cobblestone, which sounds actually ridiculous, but he's kind of he's a ridiculous criminal, so that makes sense. So then what happens is he gets this sort of fever, right? He becomes completely fever ridden, and I used to think it was like for 2 weeks, and when I went back and looked at it, I don't think it's that long of a period of time, but it's long enough that he has like this disassociated state where he's completely out of it. He knows who he is, but he's in like almost like if you were taking drugs or alcohol, or like you were in an altered state or hallucinogenics or something, and he's in this altered state of mind, and it's all based on this supposed fever he has. And of course, because he's highly malnourished and probably very dehydrated, and living in like a really bad apartment that's probably filthy and doesn't have good pipes and all that stuff. So during this period of time, he is plagued by these nightmares and dreams, and this is like I wouldn't say that's really a common component of dissociated states at all. We're going to get into that, but in this novel it is, and I'm only bringing it up because it kind of shows his actual real thoughts, which are he actually still has a moral core. Like, he starts to feel this terrible guilt and shame for, I don't know if it's because the sister was there too and he had to kill her, or it's just he killed anybody, just the fact that he killed anybody. Like, people can be all talk, and then when they actually do something violent, they can be like, okay, that actually is not what I thought it would be like. So that's kind of like what he goes through. And so one of the dreams he has is of him being a little boy, and him and his father are walking in the forest, and they see this old mare, this horse, being beaten to death by the villagers, and they don't intervene or help. And that's one nightmare he has. The other one is that there's like some sort of plague in the land, and everybody comes down with this terrible illness, and they're all sort of dying off. But for some reason, I guess because he considers himself special, he's saved. But his punishment is that he has to witness all this barbarism of like this whole thing taking over. And then it's kind of like, well, why was I marked out of death? And so those are his dreams. So that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about with that book in terms of, I'm not going to go on and tell you the whole story, but the disassociated parts, the reason I wanted to compare it is because, okay, so here's the things he goes through that are considered disassociated traits. Depersonalization. Depersonalization is basically like as if, let's say something traumatic happened to me, right? And, in my childhood, right? Let's say I'm somewhere as an adult, and the smell of, a perfume or something, or a cologne, reminds me of something that like maybe somebody who had, molested me or something had been wearing. It's just the scent, because like trauma is really based on your senses, like sound, touch, smell, all those things, really sensory bound. Trauma, very sensory bound. So, okay, so let's say that starts happening. One thing I might do is I might start, without realizing, okay, this isn't stuff where you sit there and you think, oh, this is upsetting to me, I'm going to do this. That's not what it is. It's like your body does it to protect itself, okay? Because your body is like, your sympathetic nervous system is just floods with feelings, right? So as human beings, we are drawn to, one, getting closer to pleasure and pulling further away from pain. That's just an innate response as a human being. That's what we do, okay? Like, if there is something to eat that is super delicious, we are going to go towards it. If there is something painful, like cutting yourself when you're using scissors or something. Like, we're going to withdraw from, we're going to try to pull ourselves away from that happening. Okay. We're going to try to avoid pain, and we're going to try to seek pleasure. But these are just sort of, I wouldn't say they're unconscious, but it's just how the human being is created. So in a disassociated state, I might, as a trigger, as a response to being triggered, I might sort of have an out of body experience where I'm in the room, I'm doing exactly what I was doing before, but the difference is it's almost like I can see myself from high up, almost like I'm watching myself perform an action. Like maybe I'm interacting with this person who has this, this scent I don't like that's really triggering. Maybe I'm like, I don't know, maybe I was at a store and I'm buying something from them. So it's as if I'm watching a movie and the character that is me is interacting with them. But I myself am not in my body. I'm not present. It's more than like, how people are like, well, you really need to meditate and be in the present tense. It's way more than that. Like, we're talking about that feeling times like 100. Like, it's visceral. Okay. So it's not just like, you're just not present. You're just not focused. You're just not engaged. That's not what that's not what it is. Okay. Depersonalization would be like, you actually don't feel like you are yourself. And the reason you're doing that, of course, is to avoid the pain of the past experience. And what trauma usually does is, okay, during a trauma, especially in childhood, your main objective is to stay alive. That is your number one objective. Your objective is to survive. And that is why you will end up doing a lot of things, especially as a child, because you don't have as much power as you do as an adult. Although adults in situations where, like, they're being forced to do things against their will, obviously they are much like in a childhood state, right? They don't have power over their own body to get themselves out of the situation. So there is a lot of traumas you can have later. Rape is like a big one, where you would being severely humiliated in front of a group, almost like hazing, where you would have an out-of-body experience. Those are some really common ones. So what happens a lot is when children are sexually molested or made to do things against their will for someone else's benefit, is they will often blame themselves. They'll have shame, right? They have shame because they didn't stop the experience from happening. And sometimes they'll have like biological reactions, like, they might feel good if someone's touching them, even though they know it's wrong and bad, and that they hate the person. Like, not hate the person, they hate what they're doing to them, because they know they don't know like intellectually, but they know like emotionally that there's some sort of violation. Like they didn't join with someone else to have an experience. Like somebody is like coercing them and telling them things that, maybe in their gut, they're like, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't feel right. But if they have any kind of experience, or like, okay, let's say that person then takes them to the movies and buys them a whole bunch of candy and some toys they always wanted. Okay. So there you go again with a human being, right? Pleasure. We go towards pleasure. Remember, we go away from pain. So what's going to happen with a child is they're going to be like, well, I deserve these things because of, the bad feeling. But can they enjoy those things? In the back of their mind, it gets mixed up with the pain of whatever happened. And it's all bungled up, right? It's all just kind of transactional. Everything's transactional. So disassociation, other things that would happen with disassociation is You might have amnesia. And like I said, that's not very often. It's much more rare, but that would be, I think I talked about it before, where you wouldn't remember where you were or who you were or what you were doing. And there's like any kind of mental illness I'm talking about, and I want this to be super clear, is it's all a continuum, right? So you have down here where it'd be like, okay, you just have like some feelings where things don't seem real. You feel like you're like in a daydream. It doesn't feel like you're in reality. And then all the way down here on the farthest continuum might be like almost hallucinating or having intrusive thoughts to the point where you're almost imagining or creating a reality that is, you know, I guess, brutal to your psyche, something that is going to cause you so much harm. So like there's always this huge stretchy band of like where mental illness and its symptoms fall, right? So rare is the person who is exactly cookie cutter and then right in the middle. Usually people are, because of environment, genetics, how they were raised, nurture, nature, all that stuff. They'll be all the way along this spectrum. So I really hate it when people just are like black and white about mental illness, because that's probably the farthest thing from, in my opinion, describing it correctly. Because we're all different. And unfortunately, a lot of textbooks, they teach you in school, like they're just like, one size fits all. But that's actually, with how much of the brain we don't even use. I mean, we only use like a portion of it compared to how big it is. So, I mean, to me, there's just so much more we don't know. Okay. Depersonalization. Derealization is, you'll have symptoms of where you're, I guess, things are, can almost be out of focus. Objects might not seem exactly where they are. Like things in your environment are slowed down. Okay, so like when you're doing an action, let's say, time becomes almost fluid. Like the amount of, how people say like when they have a car accident, like it just happened in a second. Like I don't even know. Like it was just all of a sudden. It's exactly, that's what derealization is. Okay, so time would be either speeded up or slowed down, and the things you're doing, like the objects you're interacting with, they might not be the right texture. Like everything is like almost like you're in a cartoon. Like things are not like Alice in Wonderland. Like nothing's like what you thought it was, but it looks close enough to what you remember things look like that you're still in reality. Okay, that's what that is. What else am I going to say about these levels of, okay, well, I guess I'm going to tell a truth. Okay. I couldn't remember what part of this I was going to do what. And all right, so I think next time I need an outline. Seriously. The way that I can personally relate to disassociation or dissociated state, because I have definitely experienced it. That's kind of why I'm fascinated by it. I mean, I'm fascinated probably by all abnormal psychology, but I was a rape victim in my first year of college, many states away. Let's just say I was nowhere near where I grew up whatsoever. And let's see, I went to college at 17. So this happened second semester, so I was 18. And I went through kind of like a textbook experience of exactly what those symptoms were. For example, I remember very, very clearly like what happened during the assault and like what happened, you know, like forcefulness and like the you know, the components of why I did what I did to not get hurt, right? I mean, not hurt. I mean, rape is actually the worst kind of hurt you can ever experience in a way, because it violates your, you know, the most intimate part of yourself. However, what I'm saying is like, it was in my mind at that time, I was going to, you know, I was starting to be, you know, cut with a bottle, right? Okay, if I didn't do it, right? So in that moment, I did what I did to survive, right? However, afterward, and like all that is like, I can remember everything, visceral, the feelings, the smells, the place, the everything, everything, everything. Then there's the part where afterwards, I have like absolutely no memory of how I got from there back to my dorm room. Like absolutely, I don't remember walking. I don't remember anything. It was like I was like transported, okay? And then for like 2 days, I didn't change my clothes. I didn't take a shower. I didn't do anything. I just was in this sort of, I didn't talk. I guess I slept, but you know what? I have no memory of sleeping. I don't, if I cried, it was, you know, like silent tears or whatever. It was not, I didn't have any emotion. I was like blank, if you will, like completely preserved in nothingness. Like, I truly believe I felt in that moment, if I didn't be myself again, or feel, or laugh, or cry, or eat, or if I just didn't do anything, like nothing at all, it was almost like I could blank out the experience, as if it didn't as if I could slip back into time and slip back into who I was right before it happened, and then make a different choice, and it wouldn't happen. But of course, that was impossible. I finally did have to go tell a superior and in the college, and it got in the college paper, and there was a criminal investigation that I started the process of, but and the rape kit and all that. But I guess I was more, normal after that. Like I somehow slipped back into my real personality. However, in and out, in and out, in and out of all the different interactions that had to do with that, until I finally just dropped the case, and I couldn't handle the pressure. Dismissed it. I was, I guess, who I thought I was supposed to be, or who I used to be, who I thought I used to be. But I would have interweaving psychological moments of that depersonalization. Definitely like see myself like as if I was in a movie. Definitely feeling like time, everything was this weird, like just even picking up a glass and drinking water, like everything was like I could hear the sound of everything. Like just everything was heightened, like heightened. Like almost like okay, like when you're in love and you're the first, you know, when you're first in that glow of like the beginning honeymoon period, it's almost like everything's like surreal, everything's completely different, like everything is like magical. It was like that, only the opposite, you know what I mean? Like everything was on fast track or slow track, but none of it was anything that I would ever want to feel or have anybody else feel. And the criminal justice system is, you know, an animal unto itself. And for a young girl, it's definitely an experience that nobody should have to go through. And I was very blessed and lucky to have a family and, you know, support at my campus. Although, you know, some of that was, you know, unwanted attention for sure. Like, more like people were more interested in the gossipy part of it, or like, you know, the just it being a story, than they were about like the reality of it. So the reality of it, just like I've said before, the reality of most things that are terrible that happen to us as human beings is that it actually makes most people terribly, terribly uncomfortable, and they usually do not know what to say. And that's why they always say just something that they've heard someone else say or they think they're supposed to say, usually the wrong thing, but the person who is on the receiving end will, of course, always never talk about that with them ever, and it'll just, you know, slip into the atmosphere like it never happened. So, you know, my one wish for this world would be that we would learn how to communicate emotional intelligence. I just think that is, I mean, empathy obviously is missing, but emotional intelligence, I think it's something that is lacking, and it can make a huge difference. So during that period, for me, with the only other incident I'll bring up about dissociated states is I did go through a period when I was in, I guess, like the week off from the spring break or whatever after it happened, where I would, you know, my family would let me drive the family car or whatever, because I had you know, so a split family, so I had family back far away, and then I had family within the distance of the school. And I do remember borrowing their car, and just I would just constantly during that week get lost. I mean, like, not, I mean, I'm terrible at directions, but I mean lost. Like, I did not know sometimes where, I did not remember what highway I did not, the exits meant nothing. Like, everything was not, it's like everything was the way it was supposed to be, but my experience of it was unlike any experience of it I'd ever had before, right? So it's like the opposite of deja vu. It's like deja vu unraveled, right? I don't feel like I've been there before. I don't feel like I know what I'm doing or where I'm going. Like, I won't get lost enough that I certainly knew who I was, and I certainly knew I was supposed to be doing this or that. Like, I obviously went to drive to do something, but I would just get in these states of utter lostness. I was lost. And and it was either scary, like frightening, like it would be like, oh, I'm so afraid what's happening to me, or it would be the opposite, where it'd be like almost like a blanket of nothingness, just like I talked to before, where like it was like, oh, I'm back in that state where it's like I'm not myself, or like I don't have to be the person this happened to. I don't have to be. I'm not. I'm not. I'm not going through this. I'm somewhere else, right? But clearly, I knew I that wasn't real. I never felt like that was real. It was just sort of almost a comforting feeling. Like it was a comforting feeling to feel nothing. It was a comforting feeling to not be myself at that moment. It was a comforting feeling to be sort of in between time. All right, so I guess that's my big analysis. And I am gonna briefly tell you what I'm gonna do in future talks. By the way, this is Demons. This is a Dostoevsky. I collect his books. So this is just the cover of one of his books, Demons. It's not my favorite one, but I did have that. Also, we should know that Mario Vargas Llosa passed away today, I think at 89, and just the most amazing Latin American writer ever. Two topics I think I'm going to do in the future are going to be schizophrenia, featuring this story, January 1st, which is about a child with schizophrenia, which schizophrenia usually hits males around 17 to 21, girls more, it hits 26 to 30. This child is like 8 when she gets it, or 7. I've got to go back and reread it. She was featured on Oprah with her parents, but this is like very, very rare. Children usually are never diagnosed with something like that early. You know, when they're still developing, it's almost unheard of. But this child is and was. So I might do some research on childhood schizophrenia and then sort of go over schizophrenia like in like the regular stages of development it usually hits with the symptoms. Then I was going to do sexual shame and guilt. I know I'm just a fun person, aren't I? Okay, so if I do that, we're going to look at The Reader, which is a book about an SS soldier, a woman soldier, and she has an affair with a much younger man. And there's kind of like a sexual awakening, but that's not really the point. The point is that she has some extraordinary secrets that he finds out that are actually really terrifying psychologically. So I think we're going to get into what was her motivation for creating this relationship. What was she trying to reconcile with her own behaviors as what she did during the war. And honestly, I don't like this woman character at all whatsoever. So she's a villainess in my mind. She's actually based on a real person. So I think it might be kind of interesting to do something about shame, and maybe somebody who's not really considered a typically good person, because a lot of shame narratives are based on people who are like, you know, really good people who like something terrible happens to them, and like Go Ask Alice, or, you know, there's many things like that. But rarely do you have sort of this kind of scenario. So I think that might be an interesting video. All right, so that's it, and thanks for showing up.